Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Is it me, or was this the longest week in human history? I think it could be both. It's 5:00. Wow, look at that. It's 5:08. Long newscast. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on a Friday. 7:05. Adam Gullett will join us. More nonsense at Columbia University, including protests at Trump Tower and a conviction of a former human rights fellow at Columbia for slavery, for owning slaves, because she's a Columbia University human rights fellow. We'll get into all that with Adam Gullett. 7:35, Maryland State Senator Justin Reedy on, get this, I know it's shocking, Maryland Democrats wanting to raise your taxes. At 8:05, Tom Bevan of Real Clear Politics, and at 8:35, Susan Friccio covering Congress for Washington Times. Looks like we won't have a government shutdown. Patrice Onwuka, I know you're excited about not having a government shutdown. I don't know, what's more exciting, having a government shutdown or not having a government shutdown?
It's just the melodrama. That's what's exciting.
Right.
And happy Friday and happy Pi Day to everybody listening.
Hold on. Isn't it a paella?
Well, then that sounds like a paella. That's
yeah, right. That's
let's not go down that track.
Ethnic tint to it. So Pi Day. Now, this is what bothers me about Pi Day. Pi Day obviously is referring to the fact that it's March 14th, and pi is 3.14. For all of you who remember your sophomore year geometry. But this is now extrapolated. This unique, bizarre mathematical formula that allows you to quickly figure out the radius or diameter of a circle or whatever the hell else you use pi for, has now it's become an excuse for pizza parlors to give a 2-for-1 sale on a pizza pie.
I'll take it. I mean, what's an excuse to eat pizza on a Friday? That's what a lot of families do.
It makes as much sense as, George Washington was born today. Let's get a discount on bed sheets. I mean,
we do that too. We get a discount on cars instead.
Nothing to do with each other, but all right. Happy Pi Day indeed. And it is a happy Pi Day if you work for the federal government, if you're in the military, if you're a essential or non-essential worker. We're not going to have a shutdown, it appears. Yesterday we were talking about how Chuck Schumer was leading the charge to shut down the government. It was going to be the Schumer shutdown because he refused to end debate in the Senate. There were plenty of votes to keep the continuing resolution going through September so that we can negotiate and come up with the inevitable reconciliation package that the Republicans will put together that they don't need 60 votes for to actually fund the government with a new budget and new spending priorities. But the only move that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats had was to stomp their feet, hold their breath, turn blue in the face, and not end the debate by invoking cloture. And for 24 hours, he was a brilliant leader of that party saying, I will die on this hill, until he decided, no, maybe I'm not going to die on this hill, because they would have literally died on this hill. And you can tell exactly where Chuck Schumer was on this last night. He appeared on MSNBC. And, he was just, he was Chuck Schumer all over it. Cut one. Take a listen, Patrice.
To have the conflict on the best ground we have, summed up in a sentence, that they're making the middle class pay for tax cuts for billionaires, it's much, much better not to be in the middle of a shutdown, which would divert people from the number one issue we have against these people, which is not only all these cuts, but they're ruining democracy.
But they're ruining democracy too. I mean, it's just
so there you go. Calling on live television, calling Republicans the B word, likening them to children who were born without a parent, without a father in the house. That's the best way I can describe that word. So there you go, Patrice. I mean, I don't quite understand the strategy here. We're going to stop this and we're going to blame the Republicans. And then a day later, knowing that new media and streaming services and talk radio have Republicans back and we were getting the truth out pretty quickly, they read the writing on the wall. They completely reverse course. And then the Democrat leader of the Senate goes on to cable news and uses profanity against the Republicans. And here we are.
Well, it's so indicative of Democrats, being so flat-footed. They have no idea how to fight back right now. Even without having any levers of power, they have no strategy. It's not just that they have no messaging, and which is why they're turning to profanity and vulgarity, but it's that they don't have a compass. They don't have a way of, what is it that they actually stand for. And right now we are seeing that they're standing for waste, fraud, and abuse in federal spending. They're standing for shutting down the federal government just to get their way. And by the way, 1 year ago, when there was a continuing resolution and President Biden was in charge and the Democrats were in charge of the Senate, they were more than willing to say, oh, we cannot shut down the federal government because of the babies, because your old people will not be able to get their benefits, because X, Y, and Z, and they were willing to trot out and exploit the most vulnerable in our society. But that goes out the window now because you have a Republican president, Republican House and Senate, and they feel like they don't have anything to hang their hat on. So, he had to have read the writing on the wall. Sadly, a lot of other Democrats, especially the ones in the House, they're not reading the tea leaves, and they've lost their minds because he's now come out to say, no, let's pass this continuing resolution.
Yeah, and many Democrats on social media, I particularly saw on the X platform, they were screaming for his head. They said that he's Donald Trump's poodle. He just does whatever Donald Trump tells him to do. He's not a leader. He didn't take a stand. He needs to go. I mean, it really was a no-win situation for him. He should have never taken the stand in the first place and pretended like he was going to be the resistance. Here he is yesterday, cut 2 on the Senate floor, sort of explaining why suddenly 24 hours later he's going to support the continuing resolution. And as you hear his excuse, please explain to me what changed in one day. Listen.
While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse. For sure, the Republican bill is a terrible option. It is not a clean CR. It is deeply partisan. It doesn't address far too many of this country's needs. But I believe allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option.
Yeah, okay, but what changed? That nothing changed in 24 hours, and yet now this was his position. Do we have time for Trump here? Sure, real fast. Donald Trump yesterday, before Schumer made his decision, maybe it was Trump's rhetoric here that finally convinced Chuck.
Well, if they do a shutdown, and ultimately that might lead to very, very high taxes, because we're talking about a shutdown, we're talking about getting to work immediately on the greatest tax bill ever passed. That was the one we did. It was a renewal, and it's an addition to it. And we're going to cut people's taxes. And if we don't open, the Democrats are stopping all of these good things that we're providing. We're providing the greatest package of benefits that this country's ever provided. The biggest part of that's going to be tax cuts for the
So maybe that was part of it too. You don't hear that tactic often. Not only are people not going to get their services and there's going to be furloughs, but we're not going to be able to get to the business of cutting taxes. In fact, it might even lead to a tax increase. Who knows? Whatever it is, Chuck Schumer completely reversed course, completely caved. Republicans win, and we assume enough senators will now invoke cloture. They'll pass the CR, and we will not have a government shutdown at midnight tonight. So there you go. Happy ending all around, I suppose, except Democrats are unhappy with their leadership. So, happy ending. It's 5:15,
WMAL, making sense of the news.
All right, now we have another judge who's trying to usurp the power of the executive branch. Yesterday, U.S. District Court Judge James Bradar ordered 12 departments of the executive branch and many subsidiary agencies who had fired probationary workers that they had to rehire them and reinstate them. Although I don't even know if there's a mechanism for that kind of thing, because we've never had a district judge stand in and say, no, I have more power than the president. So you hire somebody on a probationary basis, which anybody, whether it's in the government or in a corporate setting, understands what a probationary employee is. And so the president and the Office of OMB, understanding that they believe that the federal government has exploded with personnel over the last 4 years under Joe Biden, which is 100% true, decided that these probationary employees were not needed, that they were going to cut them and then hire on an as-needed basis. And a judge steps in and says, no, you can't do that. This is James Rader, Maryland U.S. District Judge, put a TRO, temporary restraining order, against dozens of agencies, departments, and their leaderships across the federal government that had terminated workers as part of the reduction in workforce efforts. Said in this case, the government conducted massive layoffs, but it gave no advance notice. It claims it wasn't required to because it says it dismissed each one of these thousands of probationary employees for performance or other individual reasons. On the record before the court, this isn't true. There were no individualized assessments of employees. They were all just fired collectively, and you can't do that. Wow, God, it's... God bless you all who listen to us and our federal workers, but you have no idea, sadly, if you're on the side of this judge, and you're on the side of the probationary workers who just got laid off, you really are completely out of touch with what happens in the real world in terms of corporate judgment, corporate rules, corporate law, and employment law, and what the rest of us have to deal with on an individual, ongoing basis. It's Friday, Patrice, in the radio business. It's kind of a sort of black humor that if the boss calls you into his office on a Friday after your show, you might as well clean your desk out before you have the meeting. I mean, it's so common in the radio business for people getting fired, especially seasonally at certain times, at the end of the fiscal year, at the end of the calendar year. We have gallows humor about it in our business. Whenever Bill Hess says, "Hey, can you step into my office?" everyone will go, "Oh, here we go, here we go, it's time." So I try to be sympathetic to individuals who are feeling uneasy because they had a federal job and they knew that they had certain securities. But my God, I hope they understand how tone deaf they sound to the rest of the country when they lament basic, typical corporate culture when it comes to layoffs and firings. And the fact that this judge did this sounds beyond the Constitution, to say the least.
So this order applies to a number of agencies, from Veterans Affairs to Agriculture and Treasury. It's so interesting. About 12 different departments are going to be affected, and these are probationary workers, so they're not full-fledged employees as of yet. I'm not sure what their what the specifics of their labor agreements look like, but to your point, in the private sector, we're at-will workers, meaning you can be fired at the will of the employer for, frankly, any reason and at any time. I think what's going on here, though, is there's always been this assumption that if you work for the federal government, you have guaranteed job security, meaning once you're in, you're in. Good luck trying to get rid of you. You can be playing checkers and chess during the day when you should be studying regulations. You could be, moonlighting on your second job or your third business during the day, and you just get a paycheck. And these probationary employees, I don't know if they're good, I don't know if they're bad, if their performance was up to par. But there's a shift in the view of civil service. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing to say you are serving the American people and the taxpayer, and where there's an expectation that you should be working, and there should be no expectation that your job is 100% guaranteed. And maybe having that kind of just getting rid of that assumption, maybe that'll make people actually work a little bit harder. And I know we have a lot of federal workers who work hard, but I also know that there's some who goof off all day. And so, hey, I get it. There's people are nervous, they're anxious, they're sitting, random strangers talking to me about everything going on in the area in Washington because of that man in the White House. But I say, you know what? You know people, I know people who goof off, and they take advantage of us as taxpayers. This is a time to right the ship. So, this judge, I think it's going to be appealed. This is not the end of this story with these probational employees. I think at this point they may want to just consider finding a new job rather than waiting for the next federal appeal or federal judgment.
Yeah, by the way, while we're at it, and I understand the argument, well, you just did a broad, sweeping decision and you didn't consider each person individually. Hey, let's take a look at Joe Biden's pardons on his way out the door. Okay, I'm sorry, what has more impact here? And what requires historically more circumspection and individualized assessment? Giving somebody a pardon and a commutation of someone who is on death row, which really does it, or please, By the way, the Postal Service has now signed a deal with Doge for cost-cutting purposes.
Yes.
Postmaster General told congressional leaders in a letter that he'd signed an agreement with Doge to cut jobs and spending in the agency. Last night I signed an agreement with the General Services Administration and Doge representatives to assist us in identifying and achieving further efficiencies as an effort aligned with our efforts. As while we have accomplished a great deal, there's much more to be done. That's certainly an agency that can use some efficiency as well. So things are trudging along, and eventually these judges' decisions will be appealed, probably all the way to the Supreme Court. 524.
Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
Good morning to one at all. It's 5:37. I'm getting my St. Patrick's Day talk going already.
Oh, you're
Monday
getting
is St.
gearing
Patrick's
up?
Day.
Are
I'm
you
gearing
wearing
up
green
for
on
it. I like
Monday?
to talk like a leprechaun. I'm Irish. I feel like I don't have to wear green if I don't want to. That's sort of a poser thing, but sure, I probably
really?
will. Yeah, or I'll just dress like a full-on leprechaun. I'll dress like Sean Spicer. It's 7:05. Adam, no, it'll be a big day here Monday. In fact, and that'll be the debut of the new Vince show at noon.
Yes, that's
and
exciting.
It's already been announced. Vince's first guest on his new show will be Tucker Carlson.
I saw that. That is a huge get.
Vince's old bud. Hold on, it's not a huge get. They're buds. He's like Tucker hired Vince at the Daily Caller like 15 years ago. How's that a get?
But for people who don't know that, they would see, wow, Tucker Carlson and Vince.
But
you
we
know,
do
it's
know.
a great guess.
No
Okay.
offense. I would take anything
I'm sorry,
away
I
from it.
did
Let's
it.
not over-talk the case.
Larry, we want people to listen, right?
Of course they're
going to
listen, but we don't know. We got to keep it real. It's not a huge get.
All right. I'm just saying.
Coming up at 7:05, Adam Gillette of Accuracy and Media. 7:35, Maryland State Senator Justin Reedy. 8:05, Tom Bevan at Real Clear Politics. And then 8:35, Susan Friccio of the Washington Times. All right, so we're talking about Doge and the fact that Elon Musk is Hitler or Mussolini or something. I don't know. They bounce between him using the federal government and the power that he's been bestowed by Donald Trump to in some way enrich himself, yet at the same time they mock him for losing money on his Tesla shares. So I don't know, you got to pick a lane here, guys. Either he's enriching himself or he's willing to go bankrupt to do the right thing. Not sure what's going on there. They also say that the efforts to make the government more efficient that would also involve laying off people, firing people, maybe even shutting down full departments of the federal government, that it is unprecedented, it is outrageous, it is impossible, you cannot do this, you should not do this, you need congressional approval. Well, I want to give a hat tip to a great X account, Maze Moore. I subscribe to his account. He is a great video researcher, and he didn't have to go too far. 14 years ago, here he is, Barack Obama, making a big announcement. And you remember Barack Obama. Not only was President of the United States, but I believe he was the second coming of the Messiah. Here he is, cut 4, with a brand new initiative.
Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody. Waste we should be getting rid of even if we didn't have a deficit. Sure, some of these cuts aren't that big, but no amount of waste is acceptable. Not when it's your money. Not at a time when so many Americans are already cutting back. Just as families are living within their means, government should too. Did you know the federal government pays for a website devoted to a folk music ensemble made up of forest rangers? They're called the Fiddlin' Foresters. I'll put their music on my iPod, but I'm not paying for their website. And there are hundreds of similar sites that we should consolidate or just get rid of. By the way, you're not only paying for websites no one needs, you're paying for thousands of buildings all across the country no one uses. For the last decade, the government's owned a massive and completely empty warehouse in the middle of Brooklyn, for example. Now, the government hadn't been able to sell this building and others like it because of red tape and Washington politics that held things up for years.
It sounds like he's auditioning to work for Doge.
Barack Obama, yes. Listen, I love this clip because he actually sounds reasonable. And that's probably why we haven't heard anything out of Obama about Doge. It's like it's one of those situations where it's like, no, you sit this one out because you tried to initiate the very same thing, bring in some tech bros to utilize technology in a way to make the federal government more efficient. And wow, look at the ridiculous things our taxpayer dollars fund. If they want to do it on your own dime, not on our dime. So it's wonderful to see this video from Barack Obama.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Here's I look at this stuff. I remember Bill Clinton reinventing government. He put Al Gore in charge of it. I remember George Bush and compassionate conservatives where he was going to go in and keep the programs that are important, but also cut the programs that are unnecessary. But I remember. And I look at these things and I roll my eyes because, yeah, we didn't believe you then. It was all pretense. It was all a show. Oh, look at this folk music. I'll put it on my iPod. No, he never put it on his iPod. And he never cut anything, and he never sold these buildings, and he blames Red Tape because he never had the will to do it. I think he was full of garbanzos, if you know what I mean. I think that it was all a show. It was all Hollywood to sell us on this idea that he was reasonable, but he wasn't reasonable because nothing ever got done. Oh, and here's the best part. You know, Donald Trump put Elon Musk, arguably one of the most brilliant and successful men of our times, in charge of this thing. Guess who Obama put in charge of it? Listen to this.
But we're finally cutting through all that and plan to get rid of these buildings in the months ahead. We need to step up our game. We need to go after every dime. We need to make government work for you. That's why, starting today, I've asked the Vice President to lead a renewed effort to hunt down misspent tax dollars in every agency and department of this government. We're calling it the Campaign to Cut Waste, and I know Joe's the right man to lead it.
Oh.
Because nobody messes with Joe.
Okay, that's no. Now we know why nothing ever happened. Joe Biden was in charge of it. Yeah.
Listen, I get that this was a show on Obama's part, but it is important that we get this message out there because people believe the media now when they hear that this is unprecedented.
That's true.
I like literally, Larry, this week I was at a community center, sat down, and this lady starts talking to me about how all the things going on in Washington and the kids need an outlet and we need an outlet. And I immediately knew she was referring to Doge and what President Trump is doing. And I said, well, you know what? President Trump is not the first president to try to cut the federal workforce or the size of government. In fact, Obama did it and Clinton did it. Her jaw dropped because either she has never heard those facts or she couldn't believe it was coming from me, a woman who share her same skin color. And I shut her down and she kept trying to say, but this is different. I said, no, actually, this is the president getting it done after a lot of rhetoric over the years.
Yeah.
And then she turned the conversation. I said, listen, we all know people who goof around with their federal jobs. We know people who do good work, but we know people who goof around. And there is no longer a guarantee in Washington that you keep your job as a federal worker. And let's just say our conversation changed after that.
Patrice, I love you dearly, but honestly, I'm taking her side in this because she's right. This time it is different. This time they're actually doing what they promised to do. It's 5:44. Yes, I have a man crush on J.D. Vance, but that doesn't really play into this story. This is a major thing regardless of my fondness for the vice president. Yesterday, the vice president, along with his lovely wife, Usha, attended a concert at the Kennedy Center, saw the National Symphony Orchestra. And by the way, as you know, I used to work in the performing arts. And this should be the kind of thing that is celebrated by musicians, by actors, by dancers, by lovers of the arts. This is great that the vice president, this is an outward symbol that they appreciate the performing arts, classical music,
right.
And that it's a great signal that this is an important element of our public life. And for his efforts, Vice President J.D. Vance was booed by the classless, despicable, entitled, smug audience at the Kennedy Center. People captured it on video from their smartphones, and here's the moment. Take a listen. It's outrageous, and it's despicable, and it's classless, and it's embarrassing. And it's the perfect example of what's wrong right now with the way the Kennedy Center has presented themselves to our community here in Washington, D.C. It is seen as something for those special people and only for those special people. Those rich, connected elitists who go and enjoy, because this is our place with our music for our people and our enjoyment. And how dare that guy show up here? And that's and frankly, good for him for going, good for him for staying. They went through the entire concert, and it was a great thing to see. And I, for one, am proud of my vice president for putting out an outward display that we conservatives, we Republicans appreciate the fine arts, and we participate in this despite the classless rabble down there screaming and performing.
Yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure I did hear a couple of claps, so I'm sure there probably were some other supporters in the audience. But listen, these folks, I actually don't even think they represent all of the performers who were on stage, because even if you don't like the vice president or his politics, it is an honor to be performing in front of the second most powerful man in the world and the country. It lasted 30 seconds, the boos apparently and the jeers, and then people moved on. And I hope that over time, I actually hope that you see more of this. I hope you see J.D. Vance and President Trump going out and about in Washington and force these folks to, after a while, just admit, well, okay, they're regular folks. I'm going to leave the politics aside and have a good time. Leave the politics outside of the door. So, you know, kudos to him, and I want to see him and his beautiful wife, Usha, do more of this.
I also want you to know that a lot of musicians, people don't know this about the performing arts, the actors usually get all of the attention. But the performing arts also encompasses ballet dancers. It also encompasses musicians who have trained and dedicated themselves and sacrificed to be the best in their field at playing a string instrument or a horn or what have you. You never talk to them. You never hear from them. They're part of the symphony. I can tell you from my experience working in the performing arts that at least half of those musicians, if not, I'm hesitating because I don't want to be guilty of hyperbole, but I would venture to say that a majority of classical musicians or musicians who have worked their butt off and dedicated themselves to that craft, they lean to the right politically. They are more conservative than not because of the life that they have lived and because of the discipline it takes to be a good musician. It's sort of part of their character. They, I assure you, were not disgruntled by the fact that the vice president is there.
That's what I believe. That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Because here's the bottom line for everybody, including those of you who like to go to the Kennedy Center and think that it was such a cool thing to boo. And they have their First Amendment right. God bless them. Boo the vice president if you want to. But the fact of the matter is the president and the vice president and Richard Grinnell, now running the Kennedy Center, they are making changes at that place because it was run into the gutter, into bankruptcy, despite millions of dollars, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies. They are fixing that place so that it can continue to put on those concerts, and those musicians are going to continue to have jobs because of J.D. Vance. It's 5:54.
That's a great point.